Welcome to another Max to Moviestorm tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to be concentrating on getting this ball from 3D Studio Max into Moviestorm via the Modders Workshop. Now, there's a couple of things that we need to do first, so we just go into the materials, and you can see if I go back up to the top here that we've got a multi-sub object material with two materials underneath it. It's very important that you've got the naming convention correct and have the brackets with 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. like this. Okay, so you can see we've got our three texture maps here, one for the diffuse, one for the specular, and one for the normal bump. Now we need to get rid of that normal bump node before we actually export it, so we're just going to click into here and copy the texture map here straight onto the normal bump node, and basically this will just overwrite it. So we'll take an instance, that's fine, go back up to the top level of our material, and you can see that we've got a texture map in here now instead of a normal bump node, which is what we need for exporting. So if we do the same for our second material here, so yet again we've got a normal bump node, I'm going to click into that, copy the DDS file straight over the normal bump node, and you can see there that it's replaced it nicely. Okay, so yet again I'll just mention about these naming conventions, having this square brackets with the 1 for the second material, very important. Okay, so that's all our materials dealt with. We've got a couple of things that we need to do in here. As you can see, basically it's just a very simple sphere. Nothing complicated there. Okay, the first thing that we need to do is to add a skeleton to actually that our sphere will be parented to. So we go into here, create a bone. I've got snap turned on, so I can just draw a bone here from the bottom to the top of our ball and click cancel at the end, and when you click finish it creates this tiny little bone at the top which you don't need. You only need the main bone, so we'll just click delete to get rid of that. Lovely. So we'll just rename this bone just to call it something sensible so that it's easier when we come to export. So I'll just open this up, move this into the screen for you, select the bone, click OK. We can now rename it here in the name and colour section, and we'll just call it ball underscore bone. That's okay. So now we want to reselect our sphere, and we're going to give it a skin modifier. So in the list of modifiers, go down to skin and select skin, and you can see that creates a skin modifier at the top of our modifier stack here. We can now go down and add our bone, and we want the ball bone 01. Lovely. Now, if we go in and select our bone, the ball bone 01, you can see that if we move that around now, the ball follows, which means that it's successfully skinned. So that's perfect. So we're just about ready to export now, so I'm going to go and save the scene. It's very important that you save now and don't save after the export process, just in case the CAD exporter crashes. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to export the bone, then export the mesh, and then export the materials. So with the bone selected, I'm going to click export. I've made a folder on my desktop here called ball, so I'm going to put everything into this folder. As you can see, I've already got a textures folder in there. Okay, so what we're going to do is export a Cal 3D skeleton file, which we'll select from the list here. And we're just going to put our file name in here, and we'll call it ball underscore bone. We'll click on save. You can see it's identified the bone to export. Click on finish, and that's done. Now what we want to do now is export the mesh. So we'll select the mesh, export, and we're going to call it ball_mesh. Now this time we want to change the save as type to a cal3d mesh file here. Click on save, and you can see that it's identified the bone as the skeleton for the prop. This is very important. Basically, it's using this bone as a reference when it exports the mesh. If we click on Browse here, we can see that it's got the right folder and it's selecting the right file, so we don't need to change that. But if you were to change that, that's where you'd find that information. Click on Next. As this object only has a single bone, we only want to have one bone influence every vertex, so we change that to 1, and nothing else needs changing. So just click on Next here and finish, and that's the mesh exported. Okay, so finally all we need to do is export the materials. So what I tend to do here is to copy and paste the material name. So if we go in and select our first material, which is the first material in our multi-sub object material, which is ball_top, and what I'm going to do is highlight the name of the material here and copy that. It just means that there's no possibility of me getting it wrong when I type it into the save box. We'll click export again. We're going to change this from cal3d mesh to cal3d material. We're in the same location again, and we can just paste the material name in there. Click on save, and now we have to identify the corresponding material, which was the first material, ball_top. Click on next, and you can see that it's found our texture maps, and we can click on finish, and that's exported. So we do exactly the same for the other material. Control C to copy the name. Click on export. Paste the name in here. We're still on a material file. Click on save. Identify the correct material and click on next. So again, it's identified our texture map, so we can just click on finish there. Okay, so that's all our items exported. Now we just want to click close here. We do not want to save our file again, because if there was any problems with the export process, it could corrupt your Max file. So we don't want to save this. Okay, so just a quick look at the textures in Photoshop to show you which textures we're actually working with. I've got my textures folder here, which is underneath my ball folder. And if I open all of these up, I can show you what kind of resolution that we're working to. So we'll just click open to those and just ignore all these dialog boxes. Okay, so firstly we have our soil blue _ normal map, which is where our object is getting its bump from, and that's a 128 pixel squared texture, which is fine for such a small object. Having 128 pixels square is absolutely fine. So we'll just save this out. And as you can see, it's saved as a DXT1, which is an RGB DDS file with no alpha information. We want to make sure this generate bitmaps is selected. If it had transparency, then we choose the DXT5, which has the alpha information with an interpolated alpha. But we've got no alpha information here, so we'll just reselect DXT1. Lovely, click on save, and that's done. Okay, so back to the two diffuse maps that we've got, one for each material. One of them is blue here. You can see if I go to an image size, we're 256 pixels squared, so we're exactly double of the bump map. And same for this, exactly the same, 256 pixels. And finally, here's our specular map. It's quite dark in this picture, but you get the general impression that you know, we've got various light spots, and again we've got 128 pixels squared. So again, with the specular map, we're talking about half the size of the diffuse map. Okay, so we can close that down. Okay, so with everything exported, we want to sort out our file structure. So you can see I've got a shortcut to my Moviestorm installation on my desktop here, and I've also got the folder where I've exported all my files to. Have a look in here and you can see that we've got the mesh, we've got the bone, we've got our two materials, and we've got a textures folder that contains all the textures that we need. Okay, now what we want to do is make up a new add-on in the Moviestorm installation directory in the add-on directory, like so. Here we've got a list of all the add-ons that you've got installed. Assuming that this is an outside prop, let's say it was a boulder for example, then we want to find something similar that we could copy the file name structure from. Okay, so for this example, I think if we go into garden features here, we'll have a look in the data folder, and then props, set dressing, and exterior. And I just happen to know that we have a fair amount of outdoor objects in here. So if we look at this section of the directory structure, you can see we've got data, props, set dressing, exterior. So I'm just going to remember that by pasting it into a notepad document, like so, and just move that out of the way so that we can reference it. Okay, so if we look at our folder directory structure here, what we want to do is go back up to the add-on folder, and we're going to make a new folder, and this is essentially creating a new add-on, and I'll call it tutorial ball. There we go. Now underneath this folder we want to keep the same directory structure as we had before, so we're going to make a new folder called data, which corresponds to this. Under there we want to have another new folder called props, and then under here we have set underscore dressing, and finally in set dressing we want to have another new folder called exterior. Okay, so if we just open that, we have a look on the left hand side here, you can see the folder structure. You've got data, props, set dressing, exterior, which matches the example that we got from our previous add-on. Okay, so we can now copy our ball object into the new directory that we just created. So now under set dressing exterior we've now got a ball folder with the object skeleton and mesh and all the textures. We don't need that notepad file anymore, so I'll just close that. Okay, so with that all done, it's time to start up Moviestorm and open the Modders Workshop here, and I'll join you in a moment. Okay, once you've got your Modders Workshop open, you're presented with this interface. First thing that we want to do is filter out the prop that we want to start editing. So from the list of show add-ons here, I'm going to go to our tutorial ball prop folder and just select that. This takes a little while to update because basically it filters out all the objects. But once this is loaded, we'll be able to go in and start editing our ball. Okay, so that's done. We now want to find our object. We know from the folder structure that it's going to be in the props folder, and in set dressing, exterior, and there's our ball. Okay, so underneath our ball we actually want to make a new template here. So click on template, right click, and create new template. And we'll just give this a name, and we'll just call it ball, something very simple, and click OK. Now if you click the plus button next to this folder, you can see that we've got a ball there, and that activates a little panel at the bottom of the screen here. Okay, now you can resize this panel, in fact it's a good idea too, so that you can see add a mesh, and we can add our ball mesh here. And there you can see there is our ball in the viewport. Now similarly, if we scroll this up a little bit further, we can add our materials, which are both under the add material button. So there's our first material, and click on ball bottom for our second material, and that's added them to our object. Now there's a couple of things that we need to do to the materials. So if we just click on the first material, it opens this panel, and you can see that it's finding the diffuse map, and it's finding the specular map, and it's finding the normal map as well, which is absolutely ideal, so we don't actually have to do any editing here. If you wanted to change the textures, you can use the browse button. Just browse to your textures directory, so if you wanted to use the same map as the bottom of the sphere, we just do that. Very straightforward. But we'll leave that for the moment, so I'll just set this back to the way that it was. Get rid of the beginning of that there. Okay, right, just a couple more things. We never want to leave the shininess at 0, so we'll just ramp that up. As this is going to be soil, well, probably a value of about 10 will do, something like that. So we'll just roll that up, and you can see immediately we get a tiny bit of a specular highlight on there. Our specular map is very dark, so we're never going to get that much of a specular highlight on this object. Okay, so we'll go to the ball bottom material, do exactly the same. We're just going to alter the shininess up to about 10. We don't need any of the transparency options or anything like that. But there, if you did have an object that was semi-transparent. Okay, with that all done, we can now close this window, and we're just going to select the current add-on at the very top of the screen here, tutorial ball, and we can now hit save at the bottom here to save our object. I've saved it, make it nice and big for our preview, and that's done. Okay, a couple more things that we need to do before we publish this add-on, and that's if we just roll this panel out of the way again. If we go up to the very top of our object, so under exterior where it says ball, we get another set of options here. Basically it's showing us that the ball is in the set dressing exterior folder, and that it's a prop. It doesn't have a default sound, default animation, so that's fine. If we go to the tags section, it's very important that you actually select some tags for your object, because this determines how Moviestorm will organise it within the program. So I'll select it, a prop here. Just having a quick look through, I can't see anything else that I want to categorise this prop as, so that'll be fine. We'll go to the bones. Nothing's needed here, so that's fine. And we go onto the properties, and what I'm going to do for this item is I'm just going to make it scalable here. I'm also going to make it movable, which means that you'll be able to animate it in the director's view. That's fine, so we'll just click on save, and that's done. So the last thing that we need to do now is to log in as a publisher. So I'll just put my short fuse login here, and password, and hopefully this will prompt me, yes, you can now publish add-on packs. So we can click on Publish with the correct add-on selected, and there we have the name of the add-on, the location of the add-on, and we want to make sure that this requires license to use is not checked, because otherwise you won't be able to use it in Moviestorm. We'll just click on Publish down the bottom there, and it says Tutorial Ball should now be usable in Moviestorm. Okay, so now we can close all this, and basically it's time to go into Moviestorm to see if we can find our prop. So we'll close that. Let's start up Moviestorm. I'm already logged in, so I just wait for it to let me start the program. Click on Start, and we're going to create a new movie. In fact, let's go into settings and just make sure that our prop is loaded. Okay, so our list of add-ons is here, and you can see if we go down to the bottom here, we've got our Tutorial Ball add-on, and it's a free add-on, which is exactly what we want. So having checked that, we can close that, create a new movie, and we want to have a simple Moviestorm scene. And we'll have an empty set. Just click OK to the help screen. Right, now in order to find your prop, you want to go to the prop browser here, and you may be able to do it this way with the filter button. If you click on filter, there's every chance that your new add-on will appear in this list. Now, I happen to know that I've reached the limit of add-ons displayed in this list for my version of Moviestorm, so mine won't appear here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in the keyword here for ball. And there's our new prop. And we can click on that from the prop browser and put it on set. Now, of course, we're able to customize this ball because we set it as scalable when we exported it. So you can see that we can make it much smaller or much bigger, like so. So that's great. And the final thing that we need to check is that the animation will actually work with it. So we go to the director's view, and we just shift drag on the ball, and you can see it's made a nice little animation curve so that you can animate your prop as well. And that's it. That's how to get your props out of 3D Studio Max into Moviestorm.